The day I chose Alex was the day my mother told me I was dead to her. I remember standing in our family kitchen, the smell of her famous paella filling the air, when I dropped the bomb that would change everything. Mama, I've made my decision. I'm adopting. The wooden spoon she'd been stirring with clattered against the stovetop. Sophia, you can't be serious. Our blood, our heritage, it means everything. How could you even consider raising someone else's child? I'm Sophia Rodriguez, and that moment marked the beginning of my real life, even though it felt like everything was ending. I was 32, single, and had just been approved as an adoptive parent after a year-long process that tested every ounce of my patience and determination. Blood isn't everything, Mama, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There are children who need homes, need love. I can provide that. You're choosing to end our bloodline? She turned to face me, her eyes blazing. What about your father's legacy? What about everything we've sacrificed to give you the life you have? The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, more suffocating. Through the archway, I could see my sister Jasmine hovering uncertainly, her expression torn between sympathy and judgment. Jazz, I called out to her. You understand, right? She took a step back, shaking her head. I can't, Sophia. Mama's right. It's not natural. The betrayal stung worse than my mother's reaction. Jasmine had always been my ally, my confidant. But blood ties, it seemed, ran deeper than sisterhood. My father walked in then, his presence filling the doorway. What's all this commotion about? Your daughter, my mother spat, is throwing away everything we've built. She wants to adopt, to bring a stranger's child into our family. I watched his face, hoping to see understanding, but found only disappointment. He didn't say a word. He never did when it mattered, just turned and walked away. 3 months later, I stood in a different room, my heart pounding as a social worker led in a small boy with curious eyes and unruly dark hair. He was 7, quiet but not shy, and when he smiled, something in my chest clicked into place. Hi, he said, extending his hand formally. I'm Alex. I knelt to his level, taking his small hand in mine. I'm Sophia. Would you like to see some pictures I brought? He nodded eagerly, and we spent the next hour looking through photos of my apartment, the park nearby, and the piano I'd inherited from my grandmother. When his fingers traced the piano in the picture, his eyes lit up. Do you play? I asked. No, but I want to learn. They don't have a piano here. He gestured around the children's home. Sometimes I practice on the table, pretending the keys are there. That was the moment I knew. This was my son. Not by blood, but by something deeper, something chosen. The day I brought Alex home, my phone was flooded with messages from family members, each one a variation of disappointment and judgment. I deleted them all without reading, focusing instead on helping Alex arrange his few belongings in his new room. Can I really try the piano? He asked, hovering near the instrument that dominated my small living room. Of course, mi amor. It's your home now, too. He sat at the bench, his feet barely reaching the pedals, and pressed a key. The note rang clear and true through the apartment. Then another, and another. Within minutes, he was picking out a simple melody by ear. I stood there, watching in amazement as my son, yes, my son, discovered music for the first time. The joy on his face made every harsh word, every family dinner I'd miss, every holiday alone worth it. That night, after tucking Alex in, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, looking at the empty chairs where my family used to sit. The silence should have been deafening, but instead, it felt like peace, like possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Poppy, the only family friend who'd stood by me. How's the first day going with your boy? I smiled, typing back, perfect. He's already claiming the piano as his territory. Your mother's asking about you, she replied. I set the phone down without responding. Let her ask. Let them all wonder. I had made my choice, and watching Alex's fingers dance across those piano keys today, I knew it was the right one. From the hallway came the soft sound of humming. Alex, not quite asleep, working out a melody in his head. In that moment, I realized something profound. Family isn't about sharing blood. It's about sharing love. And we had that in abundance. 6 years flew by like pages in a music sheet. Alex's talent grew from those first hesitant notes into something that left people speechless. I was watching him practice for his first real recital when my phone buzzed with a notification that would crack open our peaceful world. Mom, listen to this part, Alex called out, his fingers flying over the keys. At 13, he'd already surpassed what most adults could do with a lifetime of practice. The melody he created wasn't just music, it was pure emotion translated into sound. Beautiful, mi amor, I said, then glanced at my phone. My heart stopped. There was a link to a local news article. Teen piano prodigy takes city by storm. Alex's photo smiled up at me from the screen. Mrs. Harrison wants me to play at the City Arts Festival next month, Alex said, still playing. She says there'll be talent scouts there. Before I could respond, my phone started ringing. Poppy's name flashed on the screen. Sophia, have you seen it? Her voice was urgent. The article's going viral in the family group chat. My stomach clenched. How bad is it? Your mother's already asking for Alex's schedule. Ezra's talking about untapped potential and family management. She paused. They're coming, Sophia, all of them. As if on cue, another call beeped through, Jasmine's number. I hadn't seen it in years. I have to go, I told Poppy. Keep me posted? Alex had stopped playing, watching me with concern. Everything okay, Mom? Just fine, honey, but we need to talk about something. I sat beside him on the piano bench. That article about you? Some people from my past might try to contact us. You mean your family? His fingers traced the keys without pressing them. The ones in the photos you keep in the box under your bed? I startled. How did you? I found them last year when looking for my birth certificate. He met my eyes. Why don't we ever see them? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a familiar car parked outside. Stay here, I told Alex, but he followed me anyway. I opened the door to find Jasmine standing there, looking exactly as she had 6 years ago, except for the designer handbag and expensive highlights. Sophia, she breathed, then looked past me. And you must be Alex. I'm your Aunt Jasmine. Alex stepped halfway behind me, his hand finding mine. Hi, he said quietly. Can we talk? Jasmine asked, her eyes pleading. Please, I saw the article, and I've missed you, sis. 6 years, I said flatly. 6 years of silence, and now you want to talk? I was wrong, she whispered. We all were, but Alex's talent, it's extraordinary. The family should be part of this. The family? I laughed bitterly. You mean now that there's something in it for them? It's not like that. But her eyes shifted away. Mama's changed. We all have. Ezra thinks he could help manage Alex's career. He's in the music industry now. And, stop. My voice was steel. Alex isn't a meal ticket. He's my son. Our nephew, she corrected. Our blood, even if not by birth. Alex's hand tightened in mine. Mom? His voice was small. Who's Ezra? Nobody you need to worry about, I assured him, then turned back to Jasmine. You can tell Mama and Ezra and everyone else that Alex's career is already perfectly managed, by me. The family gathering is next weekend, Jasmine pressed on. Everyone will be there. Just think about coming. For Alex's sake, he deserves to know his family. I felt Alex step forward, I know my family, he said clearly. I have my mom. Pride and love swelled in my chest as Jasmine's face fell. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Just take this. It's an invitation. Think about it. She placed it on the welcome mat when I didn't take it. We've all made mistakes, Sophia. Maybe it's time to heal them. After she left, I picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. Alex wrapped his arms around my waist. We don't have to go, he said. No, we don't. I stroked his hair, thinking hard. But maybe we should. He pulled back, surprised. Really? A plan was forming in my mind. 6 years of hurt, of judgment, of self-righteous abandonment, all suddenly crystallizing into purpose. Really, I said, sometimes, mi amor, people need to face the consequences of their choices, even family. Like a lesson? He grinned, understanding dawning in his eyes. Exactly like a lesson. I tucked the invitation into my pocket. Now, how about you play that new piece again? We want it to be perfect for the family gathering, don't we? Alex returned to the piano, but this time his music had an edge to it, something sharp, and knowing that matched the glint in my eye. The time for reconciliation had passed. Now it was time for reckoning. The week before the family gathering, memories ambushed me at every turn. I was sorting through Alex's sheet music when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Sophia? The voice was older, hesitant. It's your father. The papers scattered across the floor. 6 years of silence. And now this. What do you want? My voice came out sharper than intended. I saw you accepted the invitation. He cleared his throat. I wanted to warn you about your mother's plans. I sat down hard on the couch. Warn me? She's invited the Camerons. Their daughter runs that prestigious music academy downtown. He paused. And Ezra's brought in some industry contacts. They're trying to take control of Alex's future, I said flatly. It wasn't a question. Your mother, she sees it as correcting a mistake, making things right. He sighed. She thinks if she can guide Alex's career, it'll make up for everything. Make up for disowning me, for missing 6 years of his life? I laughed bitterly. That's rich. Sophia. No, Papa. You don't get to play concerned father now. Where were you when I needed you? When Alex asked why he didn't have a grandfather at his school events? The silence stretched between us like an old wound. I was wrong, he finally said. We all were. But your mother still controls you, I finished. Some things never change. A knock at my door interrupted us. Through the peephole, I saw Poppy standing there, looking worried. I have to go, I told my father. Thanks for the warning. I'll put it to good use. I let Poppy in, her arms full of grocery bags. Stress baking, she explained, heading straight for my kitchen. I brought supplies. It's starting already, I said, following her. The manipulation, the schemes. I know. She began unpacking flour and sugar. Jasmine called me. They're planning some big showcase of Alex's talent at the gathering. Already invited half the music industry in the city. My hands clenched around a mixing bowl. Without asking me, without asking Alex. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, Alex burst through the front door, his face flushed with excitement. Mom, Mrs. Harrison gave me a new piece to learn. She says it's perfect for... He stopped, seeing our expressions. What's wrong? Poppy busied herself with measuring ingredients while I sat Alex down at the kitchen counter. Remember how I told you about your grandparents? About why we don't see them? He nodded slowly. Because they were mad you adopted me instead of having your own kid. Right. Well, they're planning something for the gathering, something big involving your music. His face brightened momentarily, then fell. Without asking us? Exactly. I squeezed his hand. They want to control your future, mi amor, to use your talent for their own purposes. Like what happened to David? He asked quietly. My heart clenched. David had been Alex's friend from music school, a violin prodigy whose parents had pushed him so hard he'd eventually quit music altogether. Yes, like David, but we're not going to let that happen. Poppy looked up from her baking. You have a plan? A small smile played at my lips. They want a show? We'll give them one they'll never forget. What kind of show? Alex asked, his eyes sparking with interest. I pulled out my phone, showing them the text from my father. They've invited all these important people, thinking they can take control of your future, but they forgot something important. What's that? You're not just talented, mi amor. You're your own person, and you have a voice, in your music and otherwise. Understanding dawned on his face. You want me to play something different? Something they won't expect? I want you to play exactly what you want to play, and when the moment's right, I shared a look with Poppy, who was grinning now. They won't know what hit them, she finished. Alex jumped up from his seat. Can I practice now? I have some ideas. As he rushed to the piano, Poppy handed me a spoon covered in cookie dough. You know they'll never forgive you for this. They never forgave me for adopting him in the first place. I licked the spoon, tasting sweetness and determination. At least this time they'll earn their grudge. Through the kitchen doorway, I watched Alex at the piano, his fingers dancing across the keys with purpose. The melody he played wasn't the soft, crowd-pleasing classical pieces my mother would expect. It was something else entirely, something with fire and truth in every note. That's beautiful, honey, I called out. What's it called? He looked over his shoulder, a mischievous glint in his eye. I'm thinking of calling it Blood Isn't Everything. Poppy nearly dropped her mixing bowl laughing, and in that moment, watching my son transform our pain into art, I knew we were ready for whatever the gathering would bring. The family estate loomed before us, its manicured lawns and pristine fountains exactly as I remembered. Alex whistled low beside me as we pulled up in my modest sedan, surrounded by luxury vehicles. You grew up here? He asked, adjusting his tie. Not exactly the two-bedroom apartment you're used to, huh? Poppy's car pulled in behind us. Ready for this? She called out, joining us on the circular driveway. Before I could answer, the front door swung open. My mother stood there, elegant as ever in her designer dress, her arms outstretched. Sophia! Alex! Her voice carried across the lawn like wind chimes. Come in, come in. Everyone's waiting. Alex gripped my hand as we walked up the steps. My mother moved to hug him, but he stepped back slightly. Nice to meet you, he said politely, every inch the well-mannered boy I'd raised. I'm Alex. Her smile faltered for just a moment. Of course you are, dear. I'm your grandmother Shanice. She turned to me, arms still open. Sophia, mihia. Let's not pretend, Mama, I said quietly. Where's everyone else? She dropped her arms, her mask slipping slightly. In the conservatory. We've had the piano tuned specially. Of course they had. The conservatory was packed with faces I hadn't seen in years, plus plenty I didn't recognize. Ezra stood near the piano, deep in conversation with a man in an expensive suit. Jasmine hovered nearby with her husband. My father sat alone in a corner, looking uncomfortable. Alex! Ezra broke away immediately, striding over. The man of the hour. I'm your Uncle Ezra. I've arranged some amazing opportunities for you today. He has a performance scheduled next month, I cut in, at the City Arts Festival. Ezra waved his hand dismissively. Small potatoes. I'm talking about real opportunities. Record deals, prestigious academies. He gestured to the suit-wearing man. This is Marcus from Capitol Records. Alex's grip on my hand tightened. I like my current schedule, he said firmly, and my current teacher. But surely, Ezra started, but was interrupted by my mother clinking a glass. Everyone, please welcome our talented nephew, Alex. He'll be performing for us shortly. She beamed at the crowd. We're so blessed to finally have him join our family properly. Finally? Alex muttered under his breath. Where were they for the past 6 years? Exactly, I whispered back. Ezra was already ushering Alex toward the piano. I've selected some pieces that will really showcase your classical training. Nothing too modern. We want to impress the right people. Actually, Alex said, his voice carrying clearly across the room, I've prepared my own piece. A murmur went through the crowd. My mother's smile became fixed. But dear, we've already printed programs, she said. Perhaps next time you can... It's an original composition, Alex continued, sitting at the piano. I wrote it especially for today. I caught Poppy's eye across the room. She gave me a subtle thumbs up. An original piece? Marcus from Capitol Records leaned forward, interested. That's impressive for your age. My mother shot me a look that could have frozen fire. Sophia, perhaps you should guide him towards something more traditional? Alex makes his own choices about his music, I said loudly. That's how it's always been. But we know what's best for his future, Ezra interjected. The family has connections. The family? I laughed. You mean the same family that hasn't sent him a single birthday card in 6 years? That family? A heavy silence fell over the room. My father shifted in his corner chair. Perhaps, he said quietly, his first words of the day, we should let the boy play what he wants. My mother's head whipped around. Owen! But Alex had already started playing. The melody began softly, almost traditionally, before transforming into something entirely different, raw, emotional, with hints of jazz and modern influences woven through classical foundations. It was the story of our life together, of rejection and resilience, of choosing love over blood. I watched my mother's face as she recognized the underlying message, saw Ezra's frown as he realized his carefully laid plans were unraveling, noticed Jasmine's tears as the music spoke truths we'd left unspoken for years. Marcus was nodding appreciatively, tapping his foot to the complex rhythms. Other industry people in the crowd were whispering excitedly among themselves. What did you say this piece was called? Marcus asked when Alex finished. Alex stood from the piano, straight and proud. Blood isn't everything, he announced clearly. I wrote it for my mom, the only family I needed. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's perfect gathering was derailing spectacularly, and we weren't even at the main event yet. Well, Poppy said brightly into the tension, who's ready for dinner? The dining room crackled with tension as servants placed elaborate dishes before us. Alex sat between me and Poppy, while my mother held court at the head of the table, her smile growing more strained by the minute. That was quite a unique performance, she said, cutting into her meat with precise movements, though perhaps not quite what our guests expected. Marcus from Capitol Records leaned forward. Actually, I found it fascinating. The blend of classical structure with modern elements shows remarkable sophistication for someone so young. Yes, well, Ezra cut in smoothly. With proper guidance, we could channel that raw talent into something more marketable. I've already spoken with several prestigious academies. Without consulting me, I interrupted, setting down my fork. His legal guardian, Sophia. My mother's voice carried that familiar warning tone. We're simply trying to help. You can't possibly understand the complexities of the music industry. Like you didn't understand my decision to adopt? Silverware clinked against china as conversations around the table hushed. I have some contracts drawn up, Ezra pressed on, pulling papers from his jacket. Simple management agreements, nothing binding, just... Actually, Alex spoke up, his voice clear and steady. I already have management, my mom. Jasmine, sitting across from us, winced. Sweetie, your mom's amazing, but this industry requires connections, experience. Experience? I laughed. Like abandoning family? You're all experts at that. Now, Sophia, my mother's voice sharpened. That's hardly fair. We're trying to make amends. Are you? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages. Is that why you've been calling every music school in the city, claiming to be Alex's grandmother and legal guardian? Gasps echoed around the table. My mother's face paled. Or why Ezra's been approaching venues, promising Alex's performances without our knowledge, I continued, laying my phone on the table. I have the emails. You've been monitoring us? Ezra sputtered. No, they've been warning me. Turns out, people in the music industry don't appreciate being manipulated. They've been forwarding me everything. Marcus raised an eyebrow, looking at Ezra with new interest. We were trying to help, my mother insisted, to give him opportunities. Like the opportunities you gave me? I stood up, my chair scraping back. The choice between family and doing what I knew was right? Mom, Alex touched my arm, then turned to address the table. I love music, but I love it because my mom let me find it on my own. She never pushed, never demanded, never tried to control it. But your talent, Ezra started, is mine, Alex finished firmly. Not yours to manage or sell or control. My father cleared his throat. The boy's right. Owen, please, my mother hissed, but he continued. We lost 6 years, he said, looking directly at me for the first time. 6 years of birthdays, holidays, performances. We lost them because we couldn't accept Sophia's choice, and now we're trying to steal 6 years of decisions from them both. Silence fell over the table. Jasmine dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. I have a proposition, Marcus said suddenly, pulling out his business card. Not for the family, but for Alex and Sophia directly. Your composition today showed incredible promise, and your mother's clearly been managing your career beautifully so far. I'd love to discuss future possibilities with both of you. He handed the card to me, not Ezra, whose face had turned an interesting shade of purple. This is outrageous. My mother stood up, her chair toppling backward. We arranged this gathering. We brought these opportunities. No, Mama, I cut her off. You arranged an ambush. You brought people here thinking you could manipulate and control us, just like always. But Alex isn't a pawn in your game of perfect family appearances. He's my son. Our grandson, she shouted, mask finally cracking completely. Really? Alex stood up too, his voice steady. Then what's my favorite color? What grade am I in? What's my best friend's name? My mom knows all that. Where were you? The questions hung in the air like suspended notes. I think, Poppy said, standing and placing a hand on Alex's shoulder. It's time for us to go. But dessert hasn't been served, my mother protested weakly. I think we've had our fill, I replied, taking Alex's hand. Come on, mi amor. We have a practice session scheduled for tomorrow morning. As we walked toward the door, my father called out, Sophia? I turned. I'm sorry, he said simply, for everything. I nodded once, then led Alex out into the evening air, leaving behind the heavy silence of shattered pretenses and exposed truths. The night wasn't over yet. There was still one more act to come in this family drama, and I had saved the best for last. We hadn't made it halfway down the driveway when the front door burst open behind us. You can't just leave, Ezra shouted, jogging to catch up. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? I turned slowly, feeling the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. No, Ezra. Do you have any idea what you're about to lose? He stopped short, confusion crossing his face. Behind him, others spilled out onto the front steps. My mother, Jasmine, several industry contacts. Perfect. What are you talking about? Ezra demanded. I pulled out the drive. Funny thing about being a protective mother. You learn to do your research, to keep records. I tossed it to Marcus, who caught it reflexively. You might find that interesting. What is this? Marcus asked, turning the drive over in his hands. Evidence of every shady deal Ezra's made in the music industry over the past 3 years. Every young talent he's exploited, every contract he's manipulated, every penny he's skimmed. The color drained from Ezra's face. You're bluffing. Remember Tommy Martinez, the teenage guitarist you managed last year? His parents were very helpful when I reached out. So were the parents of those twin pianists from last summer. You had no right. Ezra started forward, but my father's hand caught his shoulder. Enough, my father said firmly. Haven't you done enough damage? My mother rushed down the steps. Sophia, please. Whatever Ezra's done, he's still family. We can handle this privately. Like you handled my adoption privately? I shot back. By disowning me? By turning the entire family against me? That was different. No, it wasn't. Alex's voice rang out clear and strong. It was about control, just like this is. Jasmine stepped forward, tears in her eyes. We were wrong, Sophia, about everything. Please don't do this. Do what? Expose the truth? I laughed. That's rich coming from you, Jazz. Remember when you promised to stand by me, to be there for Alex? I was scared, she whispered, scared of being cut off like you were. And now you're scared of the consequences. Funny how that works. Marcus was scrolling through his phone, face growing darker by the minute. These allegations, if they're true, they are, I confirmed. Every single one, with documentation to prove it. You'll destroy his career, my mother pleaded, like you tried to control Alex's. Poppy spoke up from beside me. Karma's not fun, is it, Shanice? Ezra lunged forward suddenly, reaching for the drive, but Marcus stepped back smoothly. I think, Marcus said coldly, I'll be taking this to our legal department and canceling any pending contracts with your agency, Ezra. You can't, Ezra sputtered. I can and I will. The industry has no place for people who exploit young talent. He turned to Alex and me. My offer to work with you both still stands. Directly. No intermediaries. My mother sank onto the steps, her perfect gathering completely derailed. Why are you doing this to us? I'm not doing anything to you, I replied calmly. I'm protecting my son, something you never understood. By destroying your cousin's career? No, Alex stepped forward, by showing that actions have consequences. Isn't that what family's supposed to teach? Pride swelled in my chest as my son stood tall, speaking truth to the people who'd rejected him before they'd even known him. We could have been great together, Ezra said bitterly. Could have made millions. We already are great, Alex replied. Without you. My father walked down the steps slowly, stopping in front of us. You've grown into a remarkable woman, Sophia. And you, he turned to Alex, are an extraordinary young man. I hope someday you'll both give me a chance to know you properly. That depends, I said quietly. Are you finally ready to make your own choices, Papa? Or will you let Mama make them for you? He looked back at my mother, then at Ezra, then at the life he'd let others control for so long. Something shifted in his eyes. I think, he said slowly, it's time I learned from my daughter's example. My mother's gasp echoed across the driveway. "Come on," I said softly, taking Alex's hand. "Let's go home." As we walked to the car, the sound of arguing erupted behind us. Ezra's desperate explanations, my mother's accusations, Jasmine's sobs. But none of it touched us anymore. We had our own music to make. "Mom?" Alex asked as we pulled away. "Are we really never coming back?" I watched the mansion shrink in the rearview mirror. "Never say never, mi amor. But if we do, it'll be on our terms, not theirs." He smiled, already humming a new melody. "I think I have an idea for my next composition." "Yeah? What's this one called?" "Consequences." The aftermath hit faster than we expected. By Monday morning, my phone was buzzing with notifications about Ezra's sudden departure from the music industry. Local news outlets picked up the story, and by Tuesday, it was everywhere. "Mom," Alex called from the living room. "We're trending." I walked in to find him scrolling through his phone. "What do you mean, trending?" "Look." He held up the screen, showing a viral video of his performance at the gathering. Someone had recorded it and posted it online with the caption, "Teen Pianist Destroys Family Gathering with Epic Truth Bomb." 3 million views, Poppy whistled, looking over his shoulder. "And the comments are wild. People love you too." My phone rang, Marcus from Capitol Records. "Sophia, we need to talk about Alex's schedule. After that video went viral, every major venue in the city wants to book him." "On our terms?" I asked firmly. "Absolutely. You're his manager, full stop. We just want to help amplify what you're already doing brilliantly." As I discussed details with Marcus, the doorbell rang. Alex answered it, then called out, "Mom, it's Grandpa." My father stood in the doorway, looking smaller somehow, without my mother's shadow looming over him. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded, ending the call. He sat awkwardly on our couch, taking in the modest apartment with its music awards on the walls and family photos. Photos he wasn't in. "Your mother's furious," he said finally. "She's banned anyone from mentioning either of you at home." "So why are you here?" I asked. "Because I'm done letting her control everything." He pulled out an envelope. "I've moved out, got my own place, and—" he slid the envelope across the coffee table. "I've transferred half my assets into a trust for Alex's education. No strings attached." "Papa, let me finish." He held up a hand. "I can't undo the past 6 years, but I can try to be better going forward, if you'll let me." Alex sat down next to him. "Do you really want to know me, or just my music?" My father turned to him, eyes glistening. "I want to know everything. Your favorite color, your best friend's name, what grade you're in, everything I should have known all along." "Blue," Alex said. "My best friend is Marcus, not the record guy, different Marcus, and I'm in 8th grade." A tear rolled down my father's cheek. "Thank you." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Jasmine. Mascara streaked down her face. "I left Thomas," she blurted out. "I couldn't. After seeing you stand up to everyone, I realized I've been living someone else's life too." "Jazz." "No, let me finish. I've been so wrong, Sophia, about everything. Watching you raise Alex, seeing how strong you are. I want to be brave like that." Alex moved to the piano, his fingers finding keys as emotions filled the room. The melody he played was gentle, healing, different from the fierce peace at the gathering. "What's this one called?" Jasmine asked softly. "Second Chances," Alex replied, not stopping. "I'm still working on it." My father pulled out his phone, showing us the screen. Dozens of missed calls from my mother. "She's trying to damage control everything," he said, calling in favors to suppress the video, threatening legal action against anyone who shares it. "Let her," I said. "The truth has a way of coming out." Ezra's left the country, Jasmine added. Apparently, there's an investigation into his business practices now. The melody from the piano swelled, filling our small living room with something that felt like hope. I can't promise everything will be perfect, my father said, but I'd like to try being a real grandfather and a real father. And I want to be a real sister, Jasmine added. If you'll have me. I looked at Alex, still playing. He nodded slightly, his music saying what words couldn't. Okay, I said finally, but we do this slowly, and everything stays transparent. No schemes, no manipulation, no control. Agreed, they said in unison. And Mom? Jasmine asked hesitantly. That's her choice to make, I replied. Just like this was ours. Alex finished his piece with a flourish that somehow managed to sound both final and beginning. Perfect timing, Poppy announced from the kitchen. I just made coffee, and Alex, honey, your new video just hit 4 million views. As we gathered around the kitchen table, my father awkwardly holding his coffee cup, Jasmine wiping away tears, Alex already composing his next piece in his head, I realized something profound. Sometimes the family you choose and the family you're born with can merge into something new, something better, but only if everyone chooses it freely. So, Papa, I said, passing him the sugar, want to hear about the first time Alex played piano? His smile was answer enough. The City Arts Festival buzzed with energy as Alex prepared backstage. His new piece, Second Chances, had evolved into something extraordinary, a complex dialogue between past and present, pain and healing. 5 minutes, the stage manager called. I adjusted Alex's tie, fighting back tears. Ready, mi amor? More than ready. He grinned, peeking through the curtain at the packed auditorium. Is everyone here? Front row. I squeezed his shoulder, even the ones we didn't expect. My mother sat stiffly between my father and Jasmine, her face unreadable. She'd arrived unannounced, slipping in just before the doors closed, our first sight of her since the gathering 3 months ago. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed. Please welcome to the stage Alex Rodriguez. The audience erupted in applause as Alex walked out, confidence in every step. He'd grown taller in these past months, stronger, not just in height, but in spirit. His fingers touched the keys, and magic filled the hall. The melody started softly, like a question, before building into something that made people lean forward in their seats. I watched my mother's face as the music washed over her, saw the moment her rigid posture began to crack. Halfway through the piece, Alex seamlessly transitioned into something new, notes I'd never heard him practice. The melody carried echoes of an old lullaby, one my mother used to sing to me and Jasmine. Her hand flew to her mouth. When the final note faded, the silence lasted precisely 1 heartbeat before the audience exploded. Alex stood, bowing, then gestured to the front row. This piece, he spoke into the microphone, is for my family, all of them, the ones who've been there from the start and the ones who are learning to be there now. My mother's shoulders shook. My father wrapped an arm around her as Alex continued. My mom taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice. Every day we choose who we want to be, who we want to love, who we want to forgive. He looked directly at my mother. Some choices take longer than others. That's okay. The music waits. The audience's applause was deafening as Alex left the stage. Backstage, he flew into my arms. That ending, I whispered. When did you? Last night, he admitted, after Grandma called. I pulled back, startled. She called you? Asked if she could come today. Said she's been listening to my videos online, every single one, over and over. He smiled. Said she finally heard what she'd been missing. A throat cleared behind us. My mother stood there, looking smaller somehow, more human. That lullaby, she said softly. You remembered. Mom taught me, Alex replied. She taught me everything important. My mother nodded, tears streaming freely now. Sophia, she turned to me. I don't deserve. No, I cut her off. You don't. But that's not how love works, is it? Can I? She hesitated. Can I try again? Not to control, not to fix, just to be here? Alex looked at me, and I saw in his eyes the same strength that had led me to adopt him all those years ago. The strength to choose love, even when it's hard. Coffee, I said finally. We can start with coffee, once a week, just talking. I'd like that, she whispered. Poppy appeared with a bouquet of flowers. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a whole line of record executives out there waiting to meet Alex. And Marcus says the video of today's performance is already going viral. Let them wait, Alex said, surprising us all. Family comes first. My mother let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. Speaking of family, my father joined us, holding up his phone. Ezra just pleaded guilty, all of it. He's facing serious time. Good, I said firmly. Actions have consequences. Yes, my mother agreed quietly. They do, all actions. She looked at me meaningfully, including mine. Jasmine appeared with coffee cups for everyone. I thought we could all use this. It's going to be a long night of celebrations. As we stood there backstage, sipping coffee and watching Alex show my mother videos of his previous performances on his phone, I realized something. Revenge hadn't brought us here. Truth had. The truth in Alex's music, in our choices, in the consequences we faced and dealt out. Mom, Alex called out, can we play that duet we've been practicing? For everyone? I set down my coffee cup and joined him at the piano. As our fingers found their places on the keys, I saw my mother lean forward, really listening for the first time. Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in making others hurt, but in showing them what they missed and giving them a chance to hear it now. We began to play.
I'm Elizabeth, Liz to friends, and I've been handling books at my dad's business since I graduated. We're in sports gear, anything a gym could need, we supply. It's a family gig, Dad started it, and I kind of fell into it after school. I never minded the numbers or the routine. It paid well, kept me close to family, and honestly, wasn't too taxing. The night I met Tom was at our annual company party. It was one of those evenings filled with too much cheap wine and those little sandwiches everyone pretends to like. I was stuck near the buffet, debating if I should try the dodgy-looking shrimp, when he walked over, plate in hand, that easy smile playing on his lips. Trust me, the shrimp's a gamble, but the mini quiches? Solid choice, he said, nudging the plate a bit towards me as he took one himself. I laughed, taking his advice. Thanks, I'm Liz, by the way. Tom. I work at the branch across town. Heard a lot about you, the boss's daughter and all. Hopefully, all good things, I said, trying to sound lighthearted. We moved away from the food, finding quieter spots to chat through the night. Tom was easy to talk to, a bit too smooth maybe, but it was refreshing. His humor was a mix of sarcasm and wit, and he had an answer for everything. We talked more about everything, music, movies, places we'd traveled. He had a way of making the evening fly by, and when he suggested grabbing coffee later in the week, I didn't hesitate. We should do this again, without the stale sandwiches and forced mingling. There's a great little cafe downtown, quiet, good for talking. Sounds good to me, I agreed, and we exchanged numbers. As I watched him mingle with others, Dad came over, a look of approval on his face. Tom's a good man, sharp. Keeps things running smoothly over at his branch. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and plans. As I left the party, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe even excited. Little did I know, that night was the start of everything, good and bad. That first meeting at the cafe wasn't supposed to turn into anything big. Just coffee, maybe a pastry, and a bit of chat outside the noisy backdrop of the corporate party. But it turned into dinner, and not long after, it turned into a life together. We got married, surrounded by family and friends who seemed just as swept up in our whirlwind romance as we were. My parents loved Tom from the start. Dad even made him his deputy and later bumped him up to head of the company. Everything seemed like it was falling into place perfectly. After the wedding, I shifted to working from home. I managed the accounts from our kitchen table, surrounded by piles of papers and the hum of the daily grind. We thought about having kids too, dreamed about it really, but life threw us a curveball. Medical reasons, the doctors said, made it a tough bet. It was a hard pill to swallow, but Tom never seemed fazed by it. He just kept on, business as usual. 9 years. It sounds like a lot when you say it out loud. 9 years of marriage can smooth out any sharp edges, or so I thought. Things with Tom had shifted, like slow-moving tectonic plates, until one day you realize there's a chasm between you. Lately, Tom had been coming home late, the scent of cologne clinging to him like a new shadow. He'd brush past me in the hallway, his face buried in his phone, fingers tapping away messages I wasn't meant to see. "Who's that keeping you so busy?" I'd ask, trying to keep my tone light, casual. "Just work stuff, you know how it is. New contracts, demanding clients." He'd reply without looking up. I nodded, pretending to believe him. But the seed of doubt was planted, watered by his growing indifference. The balance at home had shifted too. I was juggling the accounts from home, handling the chores, trying to keep everything running like a well-oiled machine. But even machines break down. One evening, I was elbow-deep in dish soap when Tom walked in. He glanced at the sink, then at me, and shook his head. "You should wear gloves, Liz. Your hands are starting to look rough," he said, his voice flat. I turned off the tap, drying my hands on a towel. "Maybe you could help out now and then, you know? It's not just my job to clean up." Tom snorted, a short, harsh sound. "I'm busting my ass at work so we can afford not to worry about money, and you want me to come home and do dishes?" "It's called helping, Tom. It's what people who live together do for each other." I shot back, my patience fraying at the edges. He rolled his eyes, dismissing the conversation with a wave of his hand as he headed toward the living room. "I don't have time for this, Liz." That was his new favorite phrase. "I don't have time." It echoed in the empty spaces of our conversations, filling them with silences that were too loud to ignore. One night, as I was folding laundry, I tried again. "We could get someone to help around the house." "It's not about the money, you said it yourself." Tom looked up from his laptop, irritation creasing his forehead. "And I told you before, I don't want strangers in our house." "We're not having this discussion again." "It's like you don't even see how tired I am," I said, the words heavier than the bedspread I was trying to straighten. He closed his laptop with a snap. "You're tired? Really, Liz? You sit at home all day, and you're tired?" And just like that, he was out the door, the sound of it closing behind him like a period at the end of a long, run-on sentence. Between the never-ending laundry, cooking, and cleaning, finding time for myself had become a luxury I couldn't afford. My appearance? It took a back seat, something Tom didn't fail to notice, or criticize. "You really should try to keep up a bit, Liz," he'd say, flipping through channels, pausing on images of polished actresses and pop stars who were my age or older. "Look at them, they manage to look good. What's your excuse?" I sighed, tired of the same old argument. "Tom, those women have teams, stylists, makeup artists, probably a plastic surgeon on speed dial. It's not a fair comparison." He scoffed, unimpressed. "Excuses, Liz. They take care of themselves. That's the difference." His words stung, and what hurt more was the cold, calculating way he'd look at me sometimes. Those looks carried no warmth, no love, just a harsh assessment, as if he was tallying my flaws like I was another line in one of my spreadsheets. As weeks slid into months, the vibe between Tom and me grew colder than a winter draft. He was home less, and when he was, it felt like he was miles away. I'd catch him lost in thought, his phone always buzzing silently beside him. Sometimes, he'd snap it up so fast you'd think it was about to explode. Late night? I called out to his retreating back one evening as he came in later than usual. He paused, shoulders tense. Yeah, had to smooth over some client issues. You know how it is. I nodded, though he wasn't looking to see it. Something in his tone didn't sit right with me. His words were too rehearsed, like he had been practicing them all the way home. A few days later, he slipped up. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was showering. I stared at it, debating. It wasn't right to snoop, but the gnawing doubt wouldn't leave me be. As I stood there, the screen lit up again, a message preview flashing briefly. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, kissed Jess. My heart sank to my feet. Who was Jess? His finger moved so quick to lock the phone when he saw me near it before. I didn't know what to do, torn between confronting him and finding out more on my own. I made a decision then, one I never thought I'd make. I contacted a detective. It felt sneaky, underhanded, but I needed the truth more than I needed to feel noble about how I got it. Look, I just want to know what's going on. I think my husband's seeing someone else, I whispered over the phone, feeling like a traitor. The detective was all business. We can handle this discreetly. You'll have answers within a week. I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and dread. Knowing was better than wondering, right? For the next few days, I played the part of the oblivious wife. Tom's late nights continued, his excuses more flimsy. I smiled, nodded, and waited. The detective's call couldn't come soon enough. The day that changed my whole life started with a tornado. The air was thick with tension and the ominous buzz of an incoming storm. I heard the tornado sirens in the distance, a wailing reminder that nature was about to unleash its fury. Tom had been on edge all morning, pacing and frequently checking his phone, which was odd given the severity of the weather forecast. Hey, Liz, can you do me a favor? The weather radio is in the barn. I need you to grab it so we can keep track of the storm, Tom said, his voice carrying a sharpness that felt like a command more than a request. I grabbed my jacket, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The wind was picking up, howling around the corners of the house as I made my way to the barn. The sky was a bruised mix of gray and black, swirling ominously. As I entered the barn, the musty smell of old hay and machine oil hit me. I flicked on the light and started searching for the radio, but something felt off. The barn was too quiet, the usual creaks and groans of the old structure eerily absent over the roar of the wind outside. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, and tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. Tom, I yelled, banging on the wood. This isn't funny. Let me out. Through the thin crack under the door, I saw his shadow. He was standing there, not moving, not helping. Liz, listen. His voice was cold, emotionless. I locked you in. A very powerful tornado is coming. It will hit here, and when it does, the barn will go first. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Why would you do this? It's simple, really. You die in the tornado, it looks like an accident. I inherit everything, and I'm free, he said, each word slicing through the howling wind like a knife. I pounded on the door with both fists, disbelief and fear mingling with each sharp thud. You can't do this, Tom. Open the door. But his footsteps receded, the crunch of gravel under his boots growing fainter until there was nothing but the storm's roar left to answer me. Panic clawed at my throat as I scrambled around the barn, looking for anything to break the door or signal for help. The realization that Tom had planned this, had wanted me gone, was a betrayal that burned hotter than my fear. Then, as the barn began to shudder with the first violent gusts, I heard another sound, barking. Mr. Jenkins' dog, a scrappy little beagle named Bandit, was outside, his barks punctuated by frantic whines. Here. I'm in here, Bandit, I screamed, hoping his owner wasn't too far behind. Moments later, the door burst open, and there was Mr. Jenkins, wide-eyed, with Bandit tugging at his heels. Liz. Thank God, I heard Bandit barking and knew something was wrong. He shouted over the wind, grabbing my arm and pulling me out into the storm. We ran together, heading for his house, the tornado sirens wail a grim soundtrack to our escape. As we reached his house, I dared to look back. The barn was already disappearing into the swirling debris, a casualty of the storm and of Tom's cruel plot. After Mr. Jenkins pulled me from the remains of the barn, he led me down into the dimly lit basement, where the sound of the tornado seemed a little more distant. He handed me a steaming cup of coffee and tuned the weather radio to the latest updates. The broadcasters were calling it a surprisingly powerful storm, one that hadn't been anticipated to hit with such ferocity. As I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, Mr. Jenkins settled across from me, his eyes filled with concern. Liz, what in the world happened out there? Why was Bandit barking at the barn? I took a deep breath, my voice shaky as I started to explain. Tom, he locked me in there. On purpose. Said it was so the tornado would take care of me. Mr. Jenkins' eyebrows shot up, his weathered face crinkling in shock. He did what now? That can't be right, Liz. It's true, I insisted, the reality of it making my voice firmer. He told me himself. Said after the tornado, he'd be free to do as he pleased. The old man shook his head, disbelief etched into every line on his face. That's cold, Liz. Real cold. And stupid. Did he really think he'd get away with it? I shrugged, the absurdity of the situation not lost on me, despite the terror it had inspired. I guess he thought the storm would cover everything up. Make it look like an accident. Shock painted Mr. Jenkins' features, and he stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. We need to call the police, now. He fished his phone from his pocket, tapping and swiping, but his face fell. No signal. Damn storms knocked out everything. We'll have to wait it out. I nodded, the reality of the situation sinking in. Outside, the wind howled like a beast at the gates, angry and relentless. Inside, the storm of betrayal and deceit was just as chaotic in my mind. Mr. Jenkins noticed my distant look and put a gentle hand on my shoulder. We've got a few hours before this lets up and we can get a call out. Then we'll get the police, and they'll take care of Tom. He won't get away with this. His words were meant to comfort, but a faint smile was all I could muster. How had I lived all these years alongside a man capable of such cold-blooded calculation? The man I had shared meals with, laughed with, and trusted with my life, planning my end so he could start anew. The hours ticked by, marked by the steady drip of a leak somewhere in the corner of the cellar and the relentless battering of the storm against the little house. Mr. Jenkins made us more coffee, and we sat mostly in silence, listening to the crackle of the radio and the distant booms of thunder. When Mr. Jenkins and I finally emerged from the storm cellar, the world looked like it had been turned inside out. Trees were down, houses were damaged, and my heart was heavy as we walked towards what remained of my home. As we approached, I saw a crowd gathered, neighbors, emergency responders, and there, in the midst of them all, was Tom. He was putting on quite a show, sobbing and clutching one of my concerned neighbors, as if he was the bereaved. Seeing him like that, playing the part of the devastated husband, ignited something fierce within me. I strode forward, my steps firm, despite the soft, mud-slicked ground. Liz. Tom's act dropped as his eyes met mine. His face went white, his fake tears drying up instantaneously. The crowd turned, a collective gasp rising as they saw me, very much alive. I didn't break stride, walking right up to him, feeling every eye on us. What's the matter, Tom? You look like you've seen a ghost, I said, my voice loud and clear, carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. Tom stuttered, his usual smooth demeanor crumbling. Liz, I thought you were. He couldn't finish his sentence, his gaze darting around, looking for any kind of sympathy or support from our neighbors. I was in the barn, Tom. Locked in. Just like you planned, right? I pushed on, not giving him room to wriggle out of the truth. He shook his head, a pathetic attempt at denial. No, that's not, it was an accident. Locked from the outside, Tom. Mr. Jenkins found me. He saved my life. I turned to gesture at Mr. Jenkins, who nodded, stepping forward to support my claims. It's true, Mr. Jenkins chimed in. Found her locked tight in that barn, just before it was destroyed. Had to break her out. The crowd's murmur turned into an uproar. Neighbors exchanged shocked glances, their faces a mix of disbelief and anger towards Tom. Seeing the doubt in their eyes, I pulled out my phone. The detective had come through last night, just before the storm. I had proof now, pictures and messages between Tom and his mistress. And if you're looking for a motive, I said, swiping through my phone to pull up the damning evidence. Here it is. I held up the screen for Tom, and for anyone else who was close enough to see. Pictures of Tom with another woman, cozy and smiling in a way he hadn't with me in months. Tom's face went from white to red, anger replacing his fear. You had me followed? You invaded my privacy? That's your takeaway here? I was incredulous, almost laughing at his audacity. Not that you tried to kill your wife. A police officer, who had been called to the scene by a neighbor, finally stepped forward. He'd heard enough and seen the photos I'd shown. Mr. Walters, I'm going to need you to come with me. After the police car drove off, the tension seemed to drain out of the crowd. Neighbors approached, offering hugs, expressions of shock and support. My parents came through the crowd, my mom in tears, my dad with an arm around her shoulders, both of them engulfing me in a tight embrace. We thought we'd lost you, Mom whispered, holding me close. I'm okay, Mom, I assured her, squeezing her back. I'm okay. The day moved on, and the crowd eventually dispersed. I stood there with Mr. Jenkins and my parents, looking at the damage, at the debris that was once my barn, at the life I had almost lost. In the weeks that followed, my life became a whirlwind, not of debris and storm winds, but of legal papers, meetings, and the hard, unyielding benches of courtrooms. Tom's trial was fast-tracked given the nature of his crime, and every time I sat in that courtroom, I saw a man I no longer recognized. He looked smaller somehow, caged in by his own misdeeds. One afternoon, as I was getting ready to head to court, my dad stopped by. He had been my rock through this ordeal, never faltering in his support. Liz, you ready for this today? He asked, his voice steady but his concern evident in his eyes. I nodded, adjusting the scarf around my neck. I have to be, Dad. It's not just for me. It's to show him he can't just get away with it. The courtroom was packed, a silent testament to the gravity of the case. As the prosecutor laid out Tom's intentions and actions, the air seemed to thicken with each word spoken. When it was my turn to testify, I stood, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. Tom wouldn't meet my eyes as I recounted what happened, his lawyer scribbling notes furiously as I spoke. The hardest part was reliving the fear, voicing it out loud in a room so quiet you could hear a pin drop. After I spoke, the defense did their best to muddy the waters, suggesting misunderstanding, desperation, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge's gavel was a sound of finality when it came down. Guilty of attempted murder, the judge declared, his voice resolute and clear. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, a cacophony of relief and disbelief. As the bailiffs took Tom away, his glance finally met mine. There was a plea there, maybe for forgiveness, for some sliver of the past to hold on to. The aftermath of the trial was a quieter sort of storm. Dad had removed Tom from the company the day after my rescue, and his position was still vacant, the office untouched. You know, Liz, Dad said one evening as we were closing up the office together. We should start looking for someone to fill Tom's position. The company needs leadership. I paused, considering. Maybe that leader could be me, I suggested, the idea forming fully for the first time. Dad looked at me, surprise etched across his features, then his face softened into a smile. I think that's a fantastic idea. You've been the backbone of this place for more years than anyone else. Life started to settle into a new normal. I was busier than ever with the company and rebuilding my life piece by piece. The community's support was overwhelming, with neighbors and friends constantly checking in or dropping by with food, flowers, and words of encouragement. After Tom's conviction, the divorce was quick and to the point. There wasn't much to discuss. The court granted me all his properties on the grounds of his deceit and the severe nature of his betrayal. A few months into navigating my new life as the head of the company and rebuilding from the emotional rubble, I got an unexpected call. It was Tom's lawyer, sounding overly formal and slightly uncomfortable. "Ms. Walters, Tom would like to meet with you. He's requested a visit at the prison," he relayed. I paused, the past and its shadows briefly clouding my day. Did he say why? He mentioned needing to apologize, to make amends for his actions. The lawyer continued, his voice carefully neutral. I took a deep breath, the memory swirling, bitter and sharp. Tell him I'll think about it. A week later, I stood outside the prison, the building stark and uninviting. Inside, I was led through a series of security checks, before being shown to a small, stark room with chairs on either side of a glass partition. Tom was already there, looking older, the weight of his guilt etched into his features. He picked up the phone on his side as soon as I sat down. "Liz, thank you for coming," he started, his voice shaky. I picked up the receiver, my grip firm. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Tom. What do you want?" Tom swallowed, his eyes not meeting mine. I'm sorry, Liz. For everything. I was hoping, maybe you could find it in you to forgive me, to speak on my behalf for a pardon. Tom, you tried to kill me. You planned it so you could be with someone else, while keeping everything we built together. You're not asking for forgiveness, you're asking for a favor because you're still trying to take the easy way out, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I know it's a lot to ask, but... I cut him off, needing to finish this on my own terms. No, Tom. I came here for closure, not to offer you absolution. You need to serve your time, just like I had to endure the pain and the fear you caused. Tom's face crumpled, and he finally looked at me, really looked at me. There was desperation there, but behind it, I saw the realization that I was no longer the woman he thought he could manipulate. I can't help you, Tom. I won't, I said firmly, setting down the receiver with a finality that felt like the closing of a heavy door. I walked out of that prison, feeling lighter than I had in years. It was over. I was free, not just from Tom, but from the hold the past had on me. My name's Laura. I've been teaching Italian for a good part of my life, and at 42, I was pretty settled in my ways, comfortable, you might say, with the everyday hum of school bells and chalk dust. My life took a turn, though, not a dramatic one, but like when you catch someone's eye across a crowded room and just know something's going to happen. I met Marco on a typical soggy March afternoon. His daughter, Isabella, was one of my private students. A bright kid, always eager, always had her homework done on time. That day, she was scribbling away in her notebook when Marco first walked into my classroom to pick her up. "Sorry for barging in like this," he said, standing awkwardly at the door. His hair was a mess from the wind, and his coat was dripping all over the floor. "No worries at all. We're just wrapping up," I replied, giving him a reassuring smile. "Isabella's just finishing up an exercise." Marco nodded and leaned against the doorframe, watching us. "She talks a lot about you, says you make learning fun." I chuckled, closing my books. "I try. Italian is a beautiful language. It deserves a little passion, don't you think?" "Yeah, I guess," he shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm Marco, by the way." "Laura," I said, extending my hand. Isabella packed her bag, chattering about the lesson and how she couldn't wait for the next one. Marco listened, his eyes flitting between her animated face and mine. It was clear he was a devoted dad. As they were about to leave, Marco paused. Hey, if you're not busy this weekend, there's a little community gathering. Food, music, pretty laid back. Maybe you'd like to come? Bring some of that Italian passion to the party? I was taken aback, not just by the invite but by the straightforwardness of it. Sure, why not? Sounds like fun. Great. It's a date then, he said, a bit too quickly. I mean, not a date. Just, a friendly outing. Got it, I laughed, easing the awkwardness. A friendly outing. At our first real outing, as the community band played some old tunes and kids ran around, Marco opened up a bit more over plates of food. I'm a widower, he said, his voice a bit lower, a bit rough around the edges. Been raising Isabella and her brother Matteo on my own. He's 12, a real firecracker. I nodded, not sure what to say, my heart going out to him. Sounds like you've got your hands full. Yeah, it's been tough, but we manage, he replied, poking at his food. They're good kids, they make it easier. Over the next few dates, our conversations deepened. We met at small cafes, walked through parks. It was during these walks that I met Matteo, a lively boy with his father's eyes and an infectious laugh. He took to me quickly, showing me his sketches and asking about Italy. Then, Marco introduced me to his mother. She was a stout woman with a sharp tongue but a warm smile. So you're the lovely lady making my son smile again, she said, sizing me up, but not unkindly. Glad he's found someone who can put up with his cooking. Becoming part of a new family wasn't something I planned meticulously, it sort of just happened, naturally unfolding as if it was meant to be. After Marco and I had been seeing each other for a while, things started to get serious. Before I knew it, I was not just his girlfriend, but a significant presence in his and his kids' lives. One Saturday morning, we decided it was time I moved in. Packing up my life into boxes felt strange, but right. Marco and the kids helped me move my stuff into their home, which was soon to become our home. Hope you've got room for all these books, Marco joked as he lugged in yet another heavy box labeled books. Better make room, or I'm building a library in the backyard, I shot back, laughing as we shuffled around the living room trying to figure out where everything would go. Matteo and Isabella seemed excited, each of them showing me their rooms and where I could maybe put some of my things. You can put some stuff on my shelf if you want, Matteo offered, pointing to his cluttered bookshelf filled with model cars and old comic books. Thanks, Matteo. Maybe I'll just add a couple of books, eh? Leave room for your cars, I replied, ruffling his hair. The real test came when I met Marco's mother, Rosa, under the new context of moving in. She came over that afternoon, her eyes scanning every move but her tone warm. So, you're setting up shop here now, huh? She asked as she watched me arrange the kitchen. Yeah, Rosa, making it official, I answered, unsure how much territory I was allowed to mark as my own. Well, just remember, Marco likes his eggs over easy, not scrambled, she pointed out bluntly, but with a twinkle in her eye. I'll keep that in mind, I smiled, appreciating her mix of humor and directness. Living together meant adjusting, a lot of it. Marco worked long hours, and I found myself spending more time with Matteo and Isabella. I helped them with homework, we cooked meals together, and gradually, I wasn't just Laura anymore, I was a part of their daily routine. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were days when I felt like I was stepping on toes, overstepping unseen boundaries. But for every awkward moment, there were a dozen others filled with laughter and shared secrets. We were finding our rhythm, slow and steady. Marco and I had our moments too, learning about each other in ways only possible when you share a space. You make this place better, Marco said one night as we sat on the couch, exhausted from the day. I just want you guys to feel like it's still your home, I said, my head resting on his shoulder. Becoming a stepmom wasn't easy. There were no guidelines or rule books. But as I fell asleep that night, listening to the quiet hum of the house, I knew this was where I was meant to be. It was chaotic, messy, and absolutely perfect in its own imperfect way. In that moment, that was enough. Rosa and I used to have the best times together before the stroke changed everything. She'd come over and we'd spend hours in the kitchen, sharing recipes and gossiping like old friends. Those days filled the house with laughter and the warm aromas of Italian dishes we both loved to cook. But life, as it does, took a sharp turn. When Rosa was paralyzed, everything shifted. Marco moved her into our home, and naturally, I stepped up to take care of her. It seemed like the right thing to do, she was family, after all. However, Marco's help was strangely absent. I thought maybe he was just overwhelmed with work, but as days turned into weeks, his distance grew more noticeable. Caring for Rosa was a full-time job. She needed help with everything, and I did it all without a second thought, clinging to the warmth we once shared. But her condition seemed to harden her a bit, and our light chats turned into terse, functional conversations. "Did you add the basil to the sauce?" Rosa would ask sharply, watching me from her wheelchair as I cooked. "Yes, just like you taught me," I'd respond, trying to catch her eye and maybe spark a smile. But smiles were hard to come by those days. As time went on, Marco and I spoke less and less. One night, I tried to bridge the gap. "Marco, we hardly talk anymore. Is everything okay?" He was silent for a moment, then his words cut through the air. "I'm just tired, Laura. It's been a lot, dealing with everything." I nodded, feeling a chill. His eyes didn't meet mine. The disconnect between us was palpable, but I pushed it aside, focusing on Rosa and the kids. Years passed, and Rosa's presence in the house became the new normal until her death. It was sudden, despite everything, and the funeral was a blur of black dresses, somber faces, and whispered condolences. But the real shock came after the funeral, when Marco's true feelings spilled out during an argument. "You're just here taking up space now, Laura. I only put up with you because you were useful, but look at you, what use are you now?" His words were like slaps, leaving me stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Marco, how can you say that? After all these years?" "It's the truth, Laura. You were here for the kids and my mother, that's it." He turned away, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. The kids, now practically adults, started showing their true colors too. Isabella, once sweet and friendly, became cold and cruel. "You really have no one, Laura. You're just here because we pity you," she'd say, her words dripping with disdain. "Matteo wasn't any kinder. Why are you still hanging around? You're just taking up space," he'd sneer whenever we crossed paths in the hallway. Their words, their rejection, it gnawed at me daily. I felt isolated in the very home I had poured my heart into. The family I loved and cared for had turned against me, seeing me as nothing more than a temporary fixture, now obsolete. One evening, I was setting the dinner table, hoping for a quiet meal, when Marco walked in, his face like a storm cloud. "Why are you still trying to play happy families, Laura? You know it's all a show," he snapped as he threw his keys on the table. I paused, my hands trembling slightly as I placed the last fork down. "I don't understand, Marco. Why are you so angry with me? You were part of the setup, like furniture. Useful for a time, and now just taking up space," he retorted, opening the fridge and staring into it as if it held the answers to more than just his hunger. I stood there, silent, trying to process his harsh words. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Isabella and Matteo came in, their faces mirroring their father's disdain. Matteo grabbed a soda from the fridge, his eyes mocking. "Yeah, Laura, maybe you should just accept it. You're like an old couch we should have thrown out ages ago." Isabella laughed, a harsh sound that filled the room. "Seriously, Laura. Even you have to see it's true. You're just the leftovers now." Their cruelty sliced through any defense I had left. I turned away, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. "I've cared for you all, loved you. How can you treat me like this?" Marco shrugged, dismissing my emotions with a wave of his hand. "Love? That's a strong word for just doing your job, don't you think?" The rest of the dinner passed in silence, at least on my part. Their words echoed in my head: leftovers, useless, old furniture. It was clear they saw me as nothing more than a temporary help that had overstayed her welcome. Life has a way of knocking you down when you least expect it. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my health took a nosedive. My legs, which had always carried me through long days of teaching and bustling about the house, suddenly became a source of constant pain. The doctors couldn't give me a straight answer at first, tossing around terms like chronic inflammation and possible degenerative issues, which meant little more than get used to it. This change hit me like a brick. Teaching at the private school, a job I cherished and excelled at, became impossible. I had to resign, leaving behind not just my income but a part of my identity. At home, every step was a struggle, every task a monumental effort. I felt trapped in my own body and, worse, in a home where I was increasingly unwelcome. Marco's reaction to my situation was like a cold splash of reality. One morning, after I had struggled to clear up the breakfast dishes, grimacing with every move, he walked into the kitchen. He watched me for a moment, his face twisted not with concern, but irritation. "Why are you even trying to clean? You're just making a mess," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "I'm trying to help out, Marco. It's not like I can just sit around," I replied, leaning against the counter for support. "Help? You call that help? You're more of a burden now than anything," he shot back, his words slicing through the air and cutting me deeper than the pain in my legs. Marco and the kids spent money like water, flaunting new gadgets and designer clothes bought with the inheritance. Me? I got nothing, not that I expected anything different at this point. Their lavish spending was a slap in the face, a constant reminder of where I stood in this family. On top of that, Marco and the kids loved to remind me that I was only in their house out of pity. "Don't push your luck, Laura," Marco would sneer. "Remember, you're just one argument away from being out on the street." Their words were like a cage, locking me in a life of quiet desperation. But one day, I stumbled upon a website for private tutors teaching languages online. My heart raced as I explored the possibility of teaching Italian again, reconnecting with a part of myself that I thought was lost forever. I dove into setting up my profile, my fingers trembling with excitement as I typed out my experience and qualifications. "Experienced Italian teacher, personalized and engaging lessons," I wrote. Before long, I was booking my first session. The thrill of teaching, of speaking Italian, of engaging with eager students, it all came rushing back, filling me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Each day, as Marco and the kids left, I transformed a corner of my room into a makeshift classroom. I started with a few students, but word of mouth spread fast. My schedule filled up, and I found myself teaching more and more. "You're really good at this, Laura," a student told me over a video call, their words bolstering my confidence. I started receiving glowing reviews, and my rates went up. As my reputation grew, so did my earnings. It was astounding. For the first time in a long time, I was making my own money, more money than Marco, even. But I kept this to myself. If Marco or his kids knew, they'd surely find a way to claim it or ruin this for me. One afternoon, after a particularly rewarding session, I sat back and let out a long, satisfied sigh. Just then, Marco walked in earlier than usual. He eyed my setup, a laptop, notebooks, Italian flags, and teaching aids scattered around. "What's all this?" he asked, his tone suspicious. "I'm teaching," I replied, my voice steady and calm, despite my racing heart. "Teaching? Here?" His confusion was evident. He hadn't expected this. "Who would want to learn from you?" "People from all over the world," I responded with a pride I couldn't hide. "Turns out, I'm quite popular." Marco scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "Make sure this doesn't interfere with your chores around the house." "It won't," I assured him, turning back to my computer. His presence in my sanctuary irked me, but he soon left, muttering under his breath. That night, I lay in bed, a smirk playing on my lips. Marco and his kids could spend all the inheritance they wanted on fleeting pleasures. Meanwhile, I was building something lasting, something just for me. My online teaching wasn't just a job, it was my lifeline, my escape plan. I was no longer just the downtrodden stepmother, I was Laura, the sought-after Italian tutor, a woman with a plan and a growing bank account. That night at dinner, there was a tension in the air so thick you could almost see it hanging above the table. Marco and the kids were unusually quiet as I served the food, their eyes avoiding mine. I could feel something brewing beneath the surface, but nothing prepared me for the words that were about to slice through the last threads of our family ties. Marco was the first to break the silence, his voice cold and detached. "I got a promotion at work," he announced, not looking at anyone in particular. "I bought a new house, too." I paused, spoon midair, the news catching me off guard. "That's great, congratulations," I managed to say, though a sinking feeling started to form in my stomach. "Yeah, well, don't get too excited," Marco continued, his eyes now fixed on me with a hardness I hadn't seen before. "You're not coming with us." I put the spoon down, feeling suddenly like I had been punched in the gut. "What do you mean?" "Just what I said," Marco snapped. "You're not part of the plan, Laura. You stay here. I'm moving with the kids. We need a fresh start." The room spun slightly as his words sunk in. Isabella giggled cruelly from across the table, her voice like a knife. "Yeah, who needs an old limping maid in a shiny new house?" Matteo chimed in with a smirk. "Consider yourself lucky we're not kicking you out on the street tonight." I looked from face to face, each one a mask of contempt and dismissal. My heart pounded painfully in my chest. "And the house? This house?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's sold," Marco said bluntly. "New owners will take over in a month. Maybe try to find a shelter or something by then." They all laughed, a harsh, grating sound that filled the room. I sat there, stunned, my hands trembling in my lap. This was their thanks, their repayment for all the years of care, of love, of sacrifice. As the laughter died down, I found my voice, small but steady. "I see. Well, then I guess there's nothing left to say, is there?" Marco shrugged, already disinterested as he turned his attention back to his plate. "Guess not." I stood up, my legs shaky but holding. I looked at each of them, their faces still turned towards their food, no sign of remorse or regret. "Enjoy your dinner," I said quietly, then turned and left the room. In my room, the gravity of the situation hit me full force. They were really going to leave me behind, discard me like an old piece of furniture. But as I sat there, a strange sense of relief began to wash over me. I was free, free from their cruelty, their disdain, their oppressive presence. It was not the freedom I had imagined or wanted, but it was freedom nonetheless. The day I left Marco and his children behind, I felt a strange mix of liberation and deep sadness. As I hauled my last suitcase to the door, Marco's bitter words followed me. "Hope you enjoy the flophouses, because that's all you can afford," he jeered, with a cruel laugh that echoed off the empty walls. His kids, Isabella and Matteo, joined in with their own barbs. "Good riddance. Now we don't have to deal with your pathetic limping around the house." I didn't bother to reply. What was the point? I had learned long ago that words were useless against their kind of cruelty. I walked out, letting the door slam shut behind me, shutting off the chapter of my life that had brought me so much pain. Moving into the apartment I had rented in secret felt like the first true breath of fresh air in years. It was a modest place, but it was mine alone. Here, no shadows of disdain would loom over me. No harsh words would cut through the quiet. Setting up my new home was therapeutic. I arranged my books, set up my small desk by the window, the new headquarters for my online Italian lessons. I relished the peace, the utter silence that came not from tension but from tranquility. The divorce was finalized soon after. I stood in the courtroom, facing Marco and his children for the last time. They smirked, confident and unrepentant. When offered alimony, I refused. "I want nothing from him, not now, not ever," I declared. "He and his children are strangers to me." Word of my teaching spread, and my schedule became packed with students from all corners of the globe. The income was more than sufficient, a sweet victory that was all my own. One evening, while sipping tea at my new kitchen table, a call from an old friend brought unexpected news. "Have you heard about Marco?" she asked, a tone of disbelief in her voice. "He's moved into a fancy new house, but guess what? He's already blowing through money like there's no tomorrow." I couldn't help but grin, shaking my head. "No surprise there," I replied. "He never did plan for the future." Rumors about Marco and his children's reckless spending didn't surprise me, but it was the catalyst I needed to put my plan into action. During the last few tumultuous months of our marriage, I had recorded several of their verbal tirades and cruel jabs, originally for my own records, in case I ever needed proof of their behavior. I sent the files anonymously to Marco's boss. The company he worked for had a strict policy against any form of harassment, and I knew they would take it seriously. It wasn't long before the repercussions came to light. One evening, my phone rang with Marco's number. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. The desperation in his voice was palpable. "Laura, what have you done?" he blurted out, his voice a mix of anger and fear. "You've heard, then? Sounds like your company didn't appreciate the way you treat people," I said calmly, a hint of vindication coloring my words. "You've ruined me. They demoted me, slashed my salary. How am I supposed to pay the mortgage now? We could lose the house," he raged, his words tinged with panic. In the background, I could hear Isabella and Matteo, their voices loud and accusatory, blaming me, the same way they always had. "This is all your fault, Laura. You're going to pay for this." Matteo's voice cut through the phone. I couldn't help but laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that had been absent for far too long. "Now you might end up in a flophouse, isn't it ironic?" I said, the irony not lost on me. "Please, Laura, help us. We're sorry. We didn't mean any of it. We'll do anything," Marco pleaded, desperation making his voice crack. "You don't get it, Marco. I don't want your apologies or to help you. I'm done being your maid, your punching bag," I retorted sharply. "But we're family," he tried again, a last-ditch effort. "We were family," I corrected him coldly, feeling a surge of empowerment. "Goodbye, Marco." I hung up the phone, blocking his number along with Isabella's and Matteo's. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a closure I hadn't realized I needed. News reached me a few weeks later through mutual acquaintances that Marco and his children were indeed evicted after failing to make their mortgage payments. They had to downsize significantly, and the kids, now adults, had to find jobs to support themselves. The thought of them scrambling to make ends meet while I was contemplating buying my own house brought a smirk to my face. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice, about showing them that I was no longer the person they thought they could trample over. I turned my attention back to my computer, to a message from a student thanking me for my inspiring lessons. It warmed my heart. I had found my place, my purpose, and no one could take that away from me. My name is Anna. I'm an editor at one of the big publishing houses downtown, just a regular girl who likes to keep things straightforward. Life's always been a hustle, what with juggling deadlines and squeezing in some me time. That's probably why I never really got into the whole dating scene much. I preferred my own company, usually with a good book or a quiet walk in the park near my apartment. But that all changed one sunny Saturday that seemed just like any other. I was deep into a podcast, strolling along without a care in the world. The park was buzzing with people and their pets, kids running around, it was lively. I guess I lost track of where I was walking because the next thing I knew, a guy on a bicycle nearly collided with me. "Watch it," he yelled, swerving at the last second. His tone was harsh, the annoyance clear in his voice. "I'm so sorry," I blurted out, pulling out one earbud. I hadn't realized I'd wandered onto the bike path. He stopped his bike and turned around, looking more amused than angry now. "You gotta watch where you're going. This path's a jungle sometimes." "Yeah, my bad," totally my fault, I admitted, feeling a bit embarrassed. I brushed a stray lock of hair from my face and gave him a sheepish smile. He laughed, and just like that, the tension dissolved. I'm Tom, he said, extending a hand. Anna, I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, confident. So, Anna, always this distracted, or is it just my charming presence? He had this cheeky grin that made me chuckle. Just a long week at work. My brain's off enjoying the weekend already. Fair enough. I was just about to grab a coffee at that place over there. He pointed to a small cafe at the edge of the park. Care to join me? You know, as a peace offering for almost sending me flying. I considered it for a moment. He seemed nice, and honestly, I could use a coffee. Sure, why not? I could use a good coffee story to tell. As we walked to the cafe, Tom was easy to talk to. He told me about his job at a car sales company and how he liked to spend his weekends biking or hanging out with friends. He wasn't from the city, he moved here because he thought it offered more opportunities. You know, big city dreams and all that, he said with a smirk. I shared a bit about my job too, how I loved books and ended up making a career out of that passion. Beats being stuck in a cubicle doing something you hate, I added. We reached the cafe and ordered our coffees. While we waited, I couldn't help but notice how comfortable I felt around him. It was strange because usually, I'm a bit reserved around new people. But with Tom, the conversation just flowed. After meeting Tom, we started hanging out more. He was funny and easygoing, but it wasn't long before I started noticing little things that bugged me. It was nothing major at first, just small comments here and there that made me raise an eyebrow. One Saturday, we decided to go out for dinner, and somehow, the topic of careers and family came up. We were just chatting about work and life, nothing serious, or so I thought. So, how's the book world treating you? Tom asked, taking a sip of his beer. It's busy, as always. Deadlines don't stop for anyone, I replied, poking at my salad. Yeah, I get that. But you wouldn't want to be stuck in that forever, right? I mean, eventually, you'd want to settle down, maybe cut back on the work hours, he said, casually. I paused, fork midair. Not really, Tom. I love what I do. I don't see myself giving it up anytime soon or ever, really. Tom shrugged. Sure, but what about when we have kids? Wouldn't you want to be around more? The question caught me off guard. We? I chuckled nervously. That's jumping way ahead, don't you think? He laughed it off. Yeah, you're right. Just thinking out loud, I guess. I tried to shake off the discomfort, but it lingered. A couple of weeks later, Tom invited me to have dinner with his parents. I figured it was a good sign, things getting serious and all. I was nervous, but hopeful. That dinner, though, it opened my eyes a bit more. His parents lived in a cozy, well-kept house in the suburbs. His mom, Mrs. Reed, was all smiles when we arrived. Anna, so lovely to finally meet you. Tom has told us so much about you, she gushed, pulling me into a hug. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Reed. It's great to meet you too, I managed to say, returning her smile. Dinner was served, and everything was going well until Mrs. Reed started talking about family and marriage. You know, Tom was always the responsible one, she began, serving herself some more potatoes. We've always told him the importance of finding a good girl who knows her way around the house. Tom's dad nodded. Absolutely. It's about building a good foundation, you know? A man needs to provide, and a woman, well, she takes care of the home. I glanced at Tom, hoping he'd say something, but he just focused on his food. Mrs. Reed continued. It's how we raised our boys. Family first, right, Tom? Right, Mom, Tom said, finally looking up. His agreement felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to keep my cool. It's interesting because I've always been pretty career-oriented. I love my job, and I believe in contributing equally. Mrs. Reed smiled, a bit too sweetly. Of course, dear. But you'll see, priorities change when you start having children. It's only natural for a woman to want to stay at home with her babies. The rest of the evening, I felt like I was in a fog. We left shortly after dinner, and on the drive back, the air between us was tense. Your mom has some strong opinions about family roles, I said, breaking the silence. Do you see things that way too? He hesitated, then said, I think there's some truth to it. I mean, it worked for my parents. Despite the uneasy dinner with Tom's parents, our relationship marched forward. Somehow, the good times seemed to outweigh the bad, and I found myself agreeing to marry him. Looking back, love must have blinded me because those warning bells were still ringing in the back of my mind. The wedding planning started, and it was all a whirlwind. Tom wanted something simple, and so did I. We decided on a modest ceremony with just close family and friends. As the day approached, the real pressure began to mount, not about the event, but about what our lives would become afterward. After the ceremony, at the reception, Tom's mom pulled me aside. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were serious. Anna, dear, I'm so happy for you both. Remember, a good wife supports her husband no matter what. Thank you, Mrs. Reed. I intend to be a supportive partner, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. And remember, dear, when the babies start coming, it's best if you're at home. You can't trust strangers to raise your children. Her words felt like a warning, and the finality in her tone made my stomach turn. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Later, Tom and I had a moment alone. Your mom talked to me about kids and me not working, I started, watching his reaction closely. Yeah? She's just looking out for the future. She means well, Anna. You know how moms are. Tom brushed it off, taking a sip of his champagne. But you know I'm not planning to quit my job, right? Even when we have kids, I pressed, needing him to understand. Tom paused, his face serious. We'll see, Anna. Things change. We'll do what's best for our family. After our wedding, Tom suggested we move to a larger apartment, closer to his work at the car sales company. The place was nice, bigger than our old one, but it was right next door to his parents' house. I had my suspicions about why he chose this particular spot, but I agreed, hoping for the best. Once settled, the reality of our new life together began to surface. Tom started bringing up his idea of a traditional family more often, where he would be the breadwinner and I would handle the household and eventually, the kids. One evening, we sat down with our finances spread across the dining table, a mess of bills and budgets under the dim light. I tried to show him how keeping both our jobs was more beneficial, especially with the economy being unstable. Look at these numbers, Tom. With both incomes, we're not just getting by, we're actually saving. It makes no sense for me to quit my job, I said, pointing at the spreadsheet. Tom shook his head, pushing the papers away slightly. It's not just about the money, Anna. It's about having a real family life. You know, like my parents had. I sighed, my frustration growing. But it's not the past, Tom. Things are different now. We both need to contribute. He didn't seem convinced, and the discussion ended with a heavy silence. The situation got more complicated with his mother, Mrs. Reed, living so close. She dropped by often, unannounced, each visit with a new critique about how I was managing our home. One afternoon, I was sorting through some work emails when she came in. Without a greeting, she started inspecting the house, wiping her finger along the bookshelf looking for dust. Anna, you really should focus more on keeping a cleaner house. A dusty home is not a healthy home, she said, her tone sharp. I clenched my teeth, trying to keep my cool. I cleaned yesterday, Mrs. Reed. And I work full-time. It's just a little dust. That's just it, you work too much. If you were home more, maybe things wouldn't slip through, she countered, walking over to the linen closet next. She pulled out a sheet, checking for any signs of improper laundering. I followed her, my hands balled into fists at my sides. I manage my time just fine, Mrs. Reed. Tom and I are both happy with how things are. She tooted, shaking her head as she moved to the kitchen to scrutinize the contents of our fridge. A woman's place is taking care of her home and her husband. These modern ideas about women needing careers are nonsense. Every comment stung, and I felt my defenses rise. Maybe that worked for you, but I'm not you. I won't just quit my job to become someone I'm not. When Tom came home that evening, I tried to explain how suffocating his mother's visits were becoming. He listened, but his response chilled me. Mom's just trying to help, Anna. She has a lot of experience running a home. But it's our home, not hers. I need you to stand up for me, for us, I pleaded. Tom looked torn, but he finally said, "She's my mom, Anna. She means well. We should at least consider her advice." The argument that night was long and painful. We went to bed angry, the first of many silent nights. As the days turned into weeks, I felt more like an intruder in my own home, constantly judged and found wanting. The pressure to conform to an outdated idea of a wife was relentless, and my resolve to maintain my independence was tested every day. As the months rolled by, Tom's nagging about me not pulling my weight at home started to increase. He'd come home from work, look around with a scowl, and comment on the dusty shelves or the dinner that was either too bland or overcooked, because I'd rushed it after a long day at the publishing house. His favorite refrain became, "If you can't manage both, maybe you shouldn't be working." One evening, after a particularly harsh critique of some slightly undercooked pasta, Tom let it drop. "Anna, I'm serious. If you can't meet me halfway and take care of the house properly, maybe we should rethink this whole arrangement," he said, implying that a divorce was on the table. I loved Tom, despite everything. I didn't want our marriage to fail over something like this, so I made a decision that pained me deeply. The next day, I talked to my boss, Ellen, about quitting my job to become a full-time housewife. Ellen was shocked and tried to persuade me otherwise. "Anna, you're one of our best. Are you sure about this?" she asked, concern etching her features. "I don't see any other way, Ellen. I have to try to make things work at home," I admitted, feeling defeated. Ellen, ever the problem solver, proposed a compromise. "What if you could work from home? Manage your projects remotely. It's becoming more common now. You wouldn't have to quit." The idea seemed like a lifeline. I agreed to the arrangement but decided not to tell Tom. Instead, I told him I had resigned. He was overjoyed, thinking I had chosen our home life over my career. So, I started my new job as a housewife, seeing Tom off to work each morning and greeting him when he came home. But as soon as he left, I'd power up my laptop and dive into my editing work. It was a strange double life, but it worked. The money I earned from my remote job, I secretly saved in a separate bank account, just in case. However, living on just Tom's salary was tougher than we'd thought. Despite my best efforts to economize, 3 months later, we were scraping the bottom of the barrel. I tried to bring up the topic gently. "Tom, I think it might be necessary for me to go back to work. We're running through our savings too fast." Tom's reaction was swift and angry. "That's because you're spending too much. You need to learn how to save properly," he snapped. I was stunned. I hadn't bought anything for myself in months and always hunted for the cheapest deals at the supermarket. His words hurt deeply, and I felt a mix of anger and humiliation. The next day, his mother came over with a mission to teach me proper budgeting. She dragged me to the store and pointed out the cheapest, often poorest quality products. "Buy these, Anna. Stop wasting money on expensive stuff," she lectured as we walked down the aisles. Back home, she showed me how to dilute dish soap to make it last longer. "You use too much. You need to make do with less," she instructed, her tone patronizing. She even started checking my receipts, scolding me for any purchase she deemed unnecessary. "Why are you buying this? Just stick to basics," she would say, shaking her head in disapproval. Living like this was unbearable. Every day felt more suffocating than the last. I was losing my sense of self to their imposed austerity, living under constant surveillance. The situation was becoming untenable. I was trapped in a life of pretended submission, and every part of me screamed for escape. But for now, I held on, biding my time, and planning my next steps carefully. It all reached a boiling point one drizzly Tuesday evening. I was on the phone in the living room, pouring my heart out to my mom. "I just don't know how much more I can take, Mom. His mother is constantly over here, teaching me how to stretch $1 until it screams. I get it, we need to save, but this is too much." Mom's voice was a mix of concern and anger. "Anna, that's not normal. You need to have a conversation with Tom about boundaries. It's your home too, not just his or his mother's playground." Just as I was nodding, feeling a bit strengthened by my mom's support, Tom stormed in from the other room, his face red with anger. He must have heard me complaining. He snatched the phone right out of my hand. A wife shouldn't be complaining about her husband and mother-in-law like some street gossip. He snapped into the phone before hanging up. I was shocked, my hands shaking a bit. "Tom, you can't just grab my phone and talk to my mom that way." "Oh, I can't. Maybe if you had some respect for us, I wouldn't have to." His voice was rising, and I could see the veins in his neck bulging. "Tom, listen to yourself. Can't you see this isn't healthy?" I pleaded, hoping to reach some part of him that remembered what love felt like. But he was beyond reason. "Healthy? My mom was right. I should never have married you." His words cut deeper than I would have expected. "That's enough, Tom. I'm your wife, not some puppet you and your mom can control." I shot back, my own anger flaring up now. "Then act like it or leave," he shouted, his face just inches from mine. I stared at him, disbelief and sadness warring inside me. "You want me to leave? At 4 a.m.? It's dark and pouring rain outside. If you don't like how things are, then yes, get out." His eyes were cold, unyielding. I knew then that nothing I could say would change his mind or the situation. Shaking, I grabbed a few essentials, my laptop, some clothes, and my phone. I went for my purse next, but Tom was quicker. He grabbed it first, holding it out of my reach. "You think you're leaving with this? I earned this money, not you." "Fine, keep it," I said, my voice hollow. I couldn't believe this was happening. I called a taxi and waited by the door, my heart pounding. The taxi pulled up, and I stepped out into the cold night air, the rain drenching me immediately. As I climbed into the car, a sense of surreal calm settled over me. I was doing this. I was leaving. At the hotel, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed, I couldn't help but feel a surge of relief amidst the turmoil. Despite everything, I hadn't quit my job. My secret savings account, unknown to Tom, was now my lifeline. The first light of dawn was barely peeking through the curtains when I got up. I hadn't slept much, the weight of my decision pressing down on me through the night. Today was the day I would take control back. I had an appointment with a lawyer to talk about filing for divorce. It felt surreal, like a scene from someone else's life, not mine. The lawyer's office was a stark, unassuming place tucked between a row of old brick buildings. Inside, Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, was a straight-talking man who wasted no time. "Let's get down to business," he said as soon as I sat down. "You're here to file for divorce, correct?" "Yes," I confirmed, my voice steadier than I expected. "I can't go back to the way things were." Mr. Henderson nodded, his face serious. "All right. I'll need all the details. Any joint accounts, property, anything that needs untangling." We spent the next hour going over everything. He explained the legal process, what I could expect, and what my rights were. He was thorough, ensuring I understood every step before drawing up the necessary documents. "You'll need to serve these to your husband," he instructed as he handed me the envelope, sealed with a stamp that felt like the seal on my old life. Armed with the divorce papers, I went back to the apartment I had shared with Tom. He was still asleep, probably exhausted from last night's fallout. The apartment felt different as I packed my things. Every item I tucked away marked the end of another shared chapter. By the time I finished packing, Tom was stirring. He wandered into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and clearly confused to see my bags piled by the door. "What's going on?" he mumbled, scratching his head. I didn't have much to say, just actions to take. Instead of answering, I handed him the envelope. "These are for you," I said, my voice void of the emotion I felt churning inside. Tom tore open the envelope, a frown forming as he scanned the contents. "Divorce?" he laughed, disbelief lacing his tone. "You think you can just walk out and everything will be all right?" He looked up from the papers, his eyes cold. "Come back when you're ready to apologize, and maybe I'll consider taking you back. But remember, you'll have to listen to my mother from now on." The absurdity of his words almost made me laugh, but I held it back. "I'm not coming back, Tom. I'm done. We're done." Walking out of that apartment, the air felt different, crisper, almost hopeful. I went straight to a new place I had rented days before, small, but mine alone, a place where I could start rebuilding. Each step felt heavy, but right. A few weeks after moving in, I was back at the office, fully immersing myself in the whirlwind of publishing deadlines and author meetings. Being around my colleagues again, feeling the familiar rush of a fast-approaching deadline, it reignited a spark in me that I thought I had lost. Days at the office turned into weeks, and soon, I was back to my old routine, juggling manuscripts and deadlines with a newfound efficiency, fueled by my recent personal upheavals. It felt good to be back, really good. The familiar landscape of texts and typos was more comforting than I could have imagined. During this time, I reconnected with old friends, people who had known me long before Tom. We gathered for drinks after work, shared meals on weekends, and slowly, I started feeling more like myself than I had in years. Their laughter and light-hearted teasing grounded me, and in their company, I rediscovered parts of myself I'd forgotten. A few months into this new phase of my life, an unexpected call came. It was Tom. His voice was awkward, tinged with a desperation I wasn't prepared to handle. "Hey, I got laid off. Things are pretty rough," he started, his words stumbling over each other. "I was thinking, maybe you could help me out? Financially?" The request hung in the air, audacious and somewhat insulting, given our history. "And, maybe we could start over. Rebuild. I mean, if you apologize to me and my mom, show some commitment here." His voice trailed off, hopeful yet uncertain. I couldn't help it, I burst out laughing. The sheer absurdity of his proposal, after everything, was too much. "Tom, you really think I'd come back, support you and your parents, after you kicked me out? You're out of your job, and suddenly all your high and mighty principles flew out the window?" There was a pause on the line. "So, that's a no?" He sounded smaller somehow, deflated. "Tom, I'm doing well. Really well. And honestly, I'm enjoying my freedom too much to give it up again. I hope you find your feet, but it won't be with me." My words were firm, the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. After hanging up, I felt a surge of empowerment. Tom's call, although ridiculous, had affirmed something vital for me. I was truly free now, and no offer or plea was going to change that. From the moment Ava came into this world, blue-eyed and all smiles, it was clear to everyone, especially Mom and Dad, that she could do no wrong. Me? I was the other daughter, the one who got whatever was on sale, second-hand thoughts, second-hand clothes. "You see, Ava needs the best," Mom would say as she sorted through piles of shiny new gifts for my sister and handed me something like a pair of socks or a book that looked like it had been read a dozen times already. It wasn't just about the gifts. It was everything. Ava got the new clothes, the new gadgets, and all the attention. Ava, bless her heart, grew up knowing just how much everyone adored her. And why wouldn't she? She was treated like royalty. That kind of thing changes a person. She learned early on how to get her way, and if that meant stepping over me, then so be it. She'd pull these stunts, you see, tricks that left me holding the bag. Like the time she broke Dad's favorite watch and slipped it into my drawer. Guess who got grounded for a month? And she was slick, too. Got all the relatives eating out of her hand. They saw her as this sweet little angel, while I was the troublemaker, the bad seed. Elise is just difficult, they'd whisper, shaking their heads as if I couldn't hear them. But I did. Every word. Elise, why can't you be more like your sister, was a frequent chorus from Mom. She never missed a beat, especially when comparing me to Ava, who fluttered around like she owned the place. I remember one particular afternoon, we were in the living room, the sun casting long shadows across the carpet. Ava was prancing around, showing off a new dress Mom had bought her, one of those fancy brands you see in store windows. I glanced down at my own clothes, faded from too many washes, and felt that familiar pinch of envy. Isn't she just adorable? Mom cooed, clapping her hands in delight. Dad was on the couch, his attention half on his newspaper, half on Ava. Elise, can you be a dear and fetch your sister's ballet shoes? She has her recital practice soon, and you know how important it is. Mom asked without taking her eyes off Ava. I nodded, heading to Ava's room, which was twice the size of mine and stuffed with toys and gadgets I could only dream of. As I rummaged through her mess to find the damn shoes, I couldn't help but think, why her? Why not me? Here, I said, tossing the shoes at Ava's feet more harshly than I intended when I got back. She looked up, her blue eyes wide, a perfect picture of innocence. Elise, don't be rough. Apologize to your sister, Dad's voice boomed from behind his newspaper. Sorry, Ava, I mumbled, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. The only one who ever got it, who ever really saw what was going on, was Grandma, Dad's mom. She was tough as nails and didn't let anyone feed her a line of crap. Tom, she'd say to my dad, her voice stern yet not unkind, you're blinding yourself if you think your girls are being treated the same. Elise deserves just as much love and attention as Ava. But Dad would just wave her off, and Mom would roll her eyes like Grandma was just being dramatic. We treat them equally, Mom would insist, but her words fell flat in the heavy air filled with all the things they'd given Ava and not me. Grandma would pull me aside after these talks, her hands gripping mine with a strength that belied her age. Listen, Elise, you've got to be strong. Don't let them dim your light. You're just as bright, just as deserving as your sister, she'd tell me, her eyes fierce and convinced. It was enough to get me through, most days. Graduation day was supposed to be a milestone, a day to celebrate years of hard work. But for me, it was more like the final nail in the coffin of any support I might have expected from my parents. They flat out refused to help with my college tuition. We just don't think it's a good investment, Dad said with a shrug, as if my future was a bad stock option. That's when Grandma stepped in. Her offer to pay for my education wasn't just about money, it was a lifeline, pulling me out of the toxic environment of our home. You're going to do great things, Elise, and I want to see you get that chance, she said, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. Leaving home for college felt like shedding an old skin. I studied law, a field I chose partly out of interest and partly because it felt like wielding a sort of power I'd never had growing up. College was my realm, a place where my past didn't define me. When I graduated, I didn't bother going back home. Instead, I rented an apartment in the city and started my new life as a lawyer. My younger sister, Ava, stayed with our parents, who were now completely under her spell. Grandma, who kept in touch regularly, often shared stories that painted a clear picture. Ava had them wrapped around her finger, her every wish their command. It's like watching a queen with her court, Grandma said during one of our calls, her tone a mix of amusement and dismay. I didn't talk much to Mom and Dad. Our conversations were limited and strained, usually prompted by them and only when they wanted to remind me of Ava's birthday or some achievement of hers. Don't forget your sister's turning 20 next week, Mom would say, her voice cheerful as if this reminder would bridge the gap between us. My own birthday would come and go unnoticed by them, an oversight that stung less with each passing year. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, the city sprawling peacefully below, I made a decision. It was time to truly let go. The grievances and grudges, the constant comparisons to Ava, I had to release them all. I couldn't erase the past, but I could decide how much power it held over my future. My life had settled into a comfortable routine, work, the occasional happy hour with colleagues, and quiet weekends spent indulging in my love for mystery novels. That was until the day Nathan walked into my office. Nathan was a new client, referred by a colleague who thought I'd be perfect for his case. It was some messy business dispute he'd gotten himself tangled in, nothing I hadn't handled before. But from the moment he walked in, I could tell Nathan wasn't just any client. He had this easy confidence about him, a charm that didn't feel forced. "So, you're the miracle worker I've been hearing about?" Nathan said as he settled into the chair across my desk, his smile disarming. I laughed, trying not to show how flustered I was. "I don't know about miracles, but I'll do my best to sort this out for you." The case turned out to be more complicated than I had anticipated, pulling us into a whirlwind of legal strategies and late-night strategy sessions. Nathan was more involved than most clients, always wanting to understand every detail, which meant our meetings were long and frequent. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Nathan stopped at the door as we were leaving the office. "Hey, Elise, have you eaten yet? I'm starved, and I owe you a meal for keeping you so late. There's a decent Italian place nearby. What do you say?" I hesitated, not used to mixing my professional life with anything personal. "Sure, why not? But just so we're clear, this is strictly a thank you dinner, right?" Strictly professional, he agreed with a wink that suggested he was just as aware of the tension between us as I was. Dinner was a revelation. Away from the stacks of legal documents, Nathan was funny and insightful, sharing stories of his travels and his business adventures. I found myself opening up about my own life, more than I usually did with people I hadn't known for long. As we walked out of the restaurant, the cool evening air felt like a splash of clarity. "Thanks for dinner, Nathan. It was nice to get out of the office for a change," I said, meaning it more than I wanted to admit. "Glad you enjoyed it. And, Elise, I was thinking, once this whole mess is over, maybe we could go out again? No documents or disputes, just us?" I was taken aback by his directness, but something about the idea was incredibly appealing. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with my own willingness to dive into whatever this was turning into. The weeks that followed were a blur of courtroom battles and quiet dinners with Nathan. Winning the case felt doubly sweet, not just for the professional victory, but for what it might mean for us. As we celebrated over drinks, Nathan reached for my hand across the table. "Here's to winning cases, and, hopefully, winning over beautiful lawyers," he toasted, his eyes locked on mine. "Careful, counselor," I teased. "You might be charged with excessive charm." His laugh, warm and genuine, was the perfect end to our little celebration. It wasn't long after that when our professional relationship evolved into something more personal. It had been a year since Nathan and I first went out, and every moment felt right with him. So, when he proposed, it wasn't just the excitement of the moment that swept me away, it was knowing I'd be with someone who truly understood and valued me. I said yes without a second thought, and we decided not to waste any time. Excited and a bit nervous, I called my parents to share the news. I guess a part of me hoped that this might bring us closer, bridge the gap that had only widened over the years. Their reaction was lukewarm at best, but they invited me over to talk about the wedding plans. When I arrived at their house, I could sense the tension right off the bat. My mom and dad expressed their joy, but their words felt hollow. I could tell they still harbored the old belief that Ava should be the first to marry, not because of age, but because she was always the favored one. During the visit, Ava surprisingly turned on her charm. She smiled, acted sweet, and then dropped her offer like it was the helping hand of a saint. "Let me organize your wedding, Elise. It'll be my way of showing how much I want things to be good between us." I was taken aback. But before I could decline, my parents chimed in, pushing me to accept her help. You know, Elise, Ava's trying here. It would mean a lot if you let her do this for you. My mom insisted, with that tone that meant this was not just a suggestion but a directive. Feeling cornered, I reluctantly agreed. Ava got to work, or so she said. Every time we spoke, she assured me everything was under control. You just focus on your job. I've got this, she'd say cheerfully on the phone. Her confidence was convincing enough that I didn't bother to check the details myself. But as the wedding day approached, a nagging feeling prompted me to look into the preparations myself. I called the venue, expecting to hear a rundown of the plans. Instead, I was met with, "Well, we have the room reserved for you, but that's about it." My heart sank as I made more calls, to the florist, the caterer, the decorator. The story was the same. Ava had made initial inquiries, and then nothing. No follow-ups, no bookings, no payments. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal, but I wasn't about to let her ruin my big day. I called her, needing to hear her lie to me one more time. "Hey, Ava, just wanted to check in. Everything on track?" "Oh, absolutely. It's going to be beautiful, Elise. Don't worry about a thing," she replied, her voice bubbling with feigned enthusiasm. I hung up and immediately called Lila, my friend who's a professional wedding planner. I explained the situation, how Ava had dropped the ball, no, thrown it away, and how I was 2 weeks out from a wedding that was nothing more than a booked room. Lila was aghast, but sprang into action. "Elise, I'm on it. Consider it done. We'll pull this off," she assured me with a determination that was both comforting and invigorating. The wedding day, despite the underlying tensions, unfolded beautifully. The decor was impeccable, the music set a joyful tone, and our guests seemed to revel in the celebration. It was everything I had hoped for, yet a part of me remained on edge, especially when I noticed Ava, lurking in the corner with a scowl, watching everything unfold with visible displeasure. Midway through the reception, my mother took to the microphone, her voice echoing through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, we must give a special thanks to Ava, without whom this beautiful event would not have been possible. Elise, you should be very grateful to your sister." The room filled with applause, directed at Ava, who wore a feigned smile of humility. I felt a surge of anger at the blatant lie, my hands clenched under the table. I couldn't let this go, not today. Standing up, I interrupted the applause with a firm voice. "Actually, I need to set the record straight." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. Ava didn't organize any of this. In fact, she nearly sabotaged the whole wedding. You could hear a pin drop following my declaration. My parents' faces turned red with anger, and Ava's eyes widened in shock, her facade crumbling. "How dare you say that?" my mother exclaimed, her voice sharp and loud. "You're slandering your own sister on your wedding day." "I'm saying that 2 weeks before today, nothing was ready. No flowers, no cake, no decorations, nothing that you promised was done," I continued, the facts stark against the backdrop of the festive decorations. Ava, seizing the moment, began to cry loudly, her sobs theatrical. "See what I mean? She's always hated me. Always trying to make me look bad." The guests, caught off guard, murmured among themselves, many shaking their heads as they looked at me. It seemed their sympathy lay with Ava, who played the victim to perfection. "It's not slander if it's the truth," I retorted, feeling isolated as the room buzzed with whispers. The tension escalated quickly. Ava, still sobbing, ran out of the hall, adding drama to her performance. The atmosphere soured, turning what should have been a celebration into a spectacle of family drama. Over the next few weeks, the fallout was worse than I could have imagined. Ava disappeared, leaving behind a note that pointed the finger squarely at me. It claimed I had always mistreated her, that I was the reason for her misery. This note turned everyone against me, even those who had known us our whole lives. My parents believed every word, blaming me for her disappearance. Even my grandmother, the one person who had always seen through Ava's manipulations, turned cold. "I can't believe you would push her to this," she said one day, her words cutting deeper than any knife. She announced then that she was cutting ties with me, influenced perhaps by the mounting pressure and Ava's dramatic note. In the aftermath, I found myself increasingly isolated. Friends and relatives sided with Ava, leaving me to navigate the harsh reality of being ostracized by those I loved. Despite the joy that my marriage to Nathan should have brought, these events cast a long shadow over our new life together. The months following our wedding saw Nathan increasingly absent, his business trips stacking up like the unread books on my nightstand. Our conversations dwindled to polite updates, our moments together, once filled with laughter and shared secrets, now felt more like obligatory check-ins. One chilly evening, as I sorted through some bills and receipts, a particular slip of paper caught my eye. It was a credit card receipt for a high-end women's boutique, $2,000 worth of dresses and accessories. Confusion washed over me. My birthday had passed without any gifts, and our anniversary was months away. I didn't confront Nathan. Instead, I opted for a route that felt both invasive and necessary. I hired a private detective. The detective was a gruff man named Carl, who listened to my story with a non-committal grunt. "I can look into it, but are you sure you want to know what I might find?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "Yes. I have to know," I replied, my resolve firm. 2 weeks later, Carl's call came. "I have the results," he said simply, his voice neutral. It had been a while since I had spoken to my grandmother, especially after the debacle with Ava that left the family in shards. Grandma was now frail, her health waning rapidly, but her mind remained sharp, her understanding of family dynamics deep and nuanced. I visited her, the photos, the evidence of Nathan's betrayal, weighed heavily in my bag. She greeted me with a weaker smile than I remembered, the lines of pain etched deeply around her eyes. "Elise, it's been too long," she murmured, her voice a whisper of its former strength. "I know, Grandma, I'm sorry," I replied, taking a seat beside her frail form. The distance between our visits had grown, filled with unsaid words and unresolved tensions. I hesitated for a moment before pulling out the photos and sliding them across the table to her. She looked at each one, her expression unreadable. After a long pause, she looked up at me, her eyes wet with a mixture of sadness and compassion. "Oh, Elise," she sighed, reaching out a trembling hand to mine. "Your sister fooled us all, didn't she? Even me." Her words were a balm and a sting. "Yes, she did. And I think Nathan has too." Grandma pulled me into a frail hug, her body fragile, but her embrace firm. "I'm so sorry, my dear. I should have listened, should have seen." The conversation that followed was a mix of tears and laughter, a recounting of old wounds and the tentative touching of new ones. A month later, Grandma passed away. The reading of Grandma's will was scheduled at our family lawyer's office, a day I approached with a heavy heart. As relatives gathered, the room buzzed with the usual prelude to significant family events, some catching up in hushed tones, others exchanging forced pleasantries. I took a seat at the opposite end of the room, my heart pounding not just from the impending revelations of the will, but also the palpable hostility in the air. My husband, Nathan, sat beside me, his presence more obligatory than supportive. Then, the door opened, and to everyone's shock, Ava walked in. She looked different, harder, more calculated, and her smirk as she entered said she was aware of the effect her sudden appearance had on all of us. My parents, teary-eyed from surprise and immediate joy, rushed to her. "Oh, Ava, you're back," my mother exclaimed, engulfing her in a tight embrace. "Dad, Mom," Ava greeted, her voice smooth as she returned their hugs, but her eyes scanning the room, landing on Nathan and me with a gleam of triumph. Without hesitation, she approached him, leaned in, and kissed him possessively. Nathan, betraying no surprise, reciprocated with equal fervor. The room fell silent, stunned. Pulling back, Ava turned to face the room, her smile now a smirk. "I planned my disappearance," she confessed loudly, enjoying the shock her words caused. "It was all to ensure Grandma would leave everything to me, thinking Elise had driven me away." The revelation sent a murmur of disbelief around the room. My parents looked from Ava to me, confusion etching their faces. The lawyer, Mr. Hartley, cleared his throat, bringing attention back to the matter at hand. "If we may continue," he said, before reading out the will. To everyone's shock, especially Ava and Nathan's, Grandma had left everything to me. Ava's face turned from smug to stunned. "This can't be right," she stammered. "Check it again." Mr. Hartley adjusted his glasses, his tone professional. "The will is quite clear. Your grandmother made her final amendments very recently." I stood, my voice steady as I addressed the room. "I've known about their affair for months. Ava hasn't been in hiding from us, she's been living in the city where Nathan often travels for business." I pulled out the photos and evidence from the detective. I laid them on the table for everyone to see. "Not only did you try to manipulate Grandma, but you also betrayed me, Nathan," I said, my voice devoid of the pain that once would have cracked it. Nathan stood, his expression one of someone cornered. "Elise, let's discuss this." "There's nothing to discuss," I cut him off sharply. "I'm filing for divorce and for compensation for the betrayal." Ava tried to interject. "Elise, we're family. Surely we can." "Family?" I interrupted, my voice bitter. "You lost the right to call yourself that when you decided to deceive and manipulate us all for your own gain." My parents, finally grasping the full extent of the deceit, looked between us, their faces pale and drawn. "I suggest you find a good lawyer," I told Ava, not bothering to hide the scorn in my voice. Turning to Nathan, I added, "And you'll need one too." As I walked out of the lawyer's office, the weight of the past months felt lighter. The road ahead would be tough, no doubt, but for the first time in a long while, I felt the reins of my life firmly in my hands. After everything that went down, I took the only steps I saw fit as a lawyer and a woman scorned. I filed for divorce from Nathan and sued both him and Ava for the emotional havoc they wreaked with their deceit. The court proceedings were straightforward, thanks to the undeniable evidence gathered by the detective. The judge awarded me a substantial sum for moral damages, a small solace for the betrayal I endured. When the final gavel fell, closing the chapter on my marriage and the lawsuit, I felt a mix of relief and emptiness. Since the divorce and the lawsuit, I've cut ties with Nathan and Ava. Even my parents chose Ava's side again, trying to paint her as the victim, misunderstanding her actions as mere mistakes rather than the manipulations they were. This betrayal from them was almost as painful as the original deceit, making it clear that our paths had irreversibly diverged. Friends and other relatives have been supportive, their actions showing they understood the true colors of Ava and the depth of her deception. It's comforting, in a way, to know that not everyone was fooled by her charade. One evening, as I was arranging some of Grandma's old books on a shelf in the living room, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Uncle Mike, one of the few relatives who staunchly stood by me through everything. "Elise, just wanted to check in on you," he said, his gaze taking in the changes I'd made to the house. "Thanks, Uncle Mike. Come in." I invited him into the living room. He looked around, nodding approvingly. "You've done well with the place. It feels like your grandmother would have wanted, full of life again." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. It's been therapeutic, honestly. Living here, maintaining her home, it's helped me find a bit of peace after everything. Uncle Mike patted my shoulder, a comforting gesture. "She'd be proud of you, Elise. Not just for this house, but for standing up for yourself. It's what she always wanted for you." As Uncle Mike left later that evening, I stood at the doorway, watching the sun set. The horizon was ablaze with colors, a vivid reminder that life could still offer beauty after the storm. With the house as my anchor, I felt ready to face whatever came next, carrying forward the legacy of strength and resilience that Grandma left me.